Welcome to the meeting room at Global TV Talk Show, a broadcast service of globalbusinessnews.net.
Now, here's your host, Ed Cohen.
Hi, this is Ed Cohen in San Diego, and you're on a Global TV Talk Show broadcasting from globalbusinessnews.net. So Google Analytics has tracked over 125,000 audience page views since we began this talk show thing as a result of the pandemic in the spring of 2020. So thank you. We feel the weight of this responsibility to produce top quality programming. And no disappointment today is Gregg Ward from the Center for Responsible Leadership in San Diego. Welcome, Gregg, and Stephen Howard in Mexico City. Stephen, let's go to you.
Well, thank you, Ed. Thank you. Welcome to the audience. This is our Strive XL program. XL stands for Living Extra Large. And really what we want in Strive is to provide some content for leaders on how to lead their teams, lead themselves better, and just become better leaders both in the business world and in their communities as well. And so we're really lucky to have Gregg Ward with us today. So welcome, Gregg.
Thank you so much. And just a quick note, we're the Center for Respectful Leadership. Although we try to be responsible too.
So I'm so sorry. It's the
It's
second time
okay.
I blew that. Good.
It's all right.
Respectful. So respect goes both ways, up and down?
Well, respect goes all around. And one of the things we have learned during our extensive research on respect, that respect is a feeling. It's generated in the most primitive parts of our brain. And there's really interesting neuroscience around it, because a lot of us think, okay, respect is something cognitive, rational. You learn about someone, you interact with someone, and you develop respect for them over time. And what we have found is it actually can be quite instantaneous. It can happen in the moment based upon, for example, how they treat you. Are they treating you the way you expect to be treated in a respectful way? Or are they honoring and respecting what you've achieved in your life? And are they doing it in a way that you perceive as respectful? That is the key there. And so yes, it does go both ways. And generally what we found is that if I treat you, Ed and Stephen, with respect in a way that you expect to be respected, then by golly, what's going to happen in your brain is I'm triggering a little release of oxytocin, and you feel good. And what you do then is you start to, in your neocortex, you say to yourself, oh, well, Gregg just said something that I find respectful. I like that. And so you're likely to do that back to me. And so it can happen almost instantaneously. It's pretty cool.
What kind of training are you giving your clients who have to learn how to manage empty chairs, but live people on virtual?
I'll tell you, it is a challenge. So what we're trying to do is use the medium of video conferencing, audio, mixed media. We're sending them things in advance, read aheads, whatever we can do to connect with them in all the different ways they want to learn. And we're, as you know, teaching interpersonal skills and leadership skills virtually can be very, very challenging. So we're tending a little bit more towards the conceptual, so that they understand the concepts. And then what we're doing is kind of fun. As you may know, Ed, from our years of working together, we specialize in using live professional theater actors in our training programs on leadership. And so we put professional actors who are trained specifically in role play, what we call experiential learning. We don't want to call it role play. Nobody likes that. But we put them into simulations with our trainees in person, and the trainees practice the skills and tools that we've taught them.
So you're talking about modeling. It's like a fast-paced way of modeling about what to do.
It's very intense and in person. And the actor reacts in real time as if they're an employee having a conversation with their boss. Now, what we're doing in virtually is we're actually pulling the actors in. Let's say you and I are working together in a virtual workshop, and suddenly the window will pop up and it'll be one of my actors portraying somebody. And I'll say, oh, what are you doing here? And I'll either model the behavior that I want the rest of the group to learn, or I'll do it badly. And I'll say, okay, time out, everybody. What did I do wrong? How should I have handled this situation? So we kind of replicate it. If that answers your question, Ed, we kind of replicate it in the program virtually that we used to do in person.
Well, Stephen, this is extra large, isn't it?
This is extra large, and it's going to get more extra large coming out of the pandemic. Right? Totally.
Yeah.
One of the reasons we invited Gregg on the show was that these kind of what people used to call soft skills are now essential skills, and learning to be respectful as a leader. Gregg, I know you've worked overseas a little bit. I lived in Asia for 21 years and very formal societies over there. And their viewpoint on respectfulness has more of a societal formality to it.
It does.
But do you see that changing, or do you see them grasping some of these concepts of respectful leadership?
Stephen, that's an excellent question. I lived in the UK for many years, and I also traveled extensively in Western Europe as a journalist. And I noticed the cultural differences between the US, North America, and Western Europe. And having not traveled in Asian cultures, I've only heard about it from a lot of my clients. I've had Nissan, for example, as a client. And so I've worked with some of their executive leadership. So you're 100% right. Those cultures are more formal. And one of the key things around respect is, for example, you must respect those in authority. And that is like an absolute, you got to do that. And that's not necessarily a US kind of approach to
Really?
So what I have found is that I want to honor that cultural commitment that they make. And I do remind them, however, that even though we have been taught since we were children to respect those in authority, when those in authority behave in ways that we consider disrespectful, we actually lose respect for them. Although we may never say it, we may never behave differently, internally, we see them through a different lens. And that does impact relationships. And that's why I say to these executives from Asian cultures, I say, look, you have to be aware that even though no one says anything to you, they may have lost respect for you, and you need to be on your game when it comes to respecting those who work for you.
So body language and culture, let's talk about that for a second, particularly in Europe and Asia, where let's just talk that it's mostly guys, okay?
Yeah.
They're kind of wooden, right? I mean, they don't smile like you and I are smiling, and they don't emote. They're just voices of authority.
They're more reticent. They're more reticent in terms of their emotional expression. And that's generally true. And of course, we have that in every culture. It just so happens it's more acceptable or more supported in Asian cultures than it is in American cultures, for example, where we let it all hang out in many cases. So what we talk to them about is emotional intelligence, and we help them understand that they like all human beings, we are emotional beings first. There's a wonderful neuroscientist at NYU's, Joseph Ledoux, who says we have to remember that we are emotional beings first. We are not thinking beings who happen to have emotions. We are emotional beings who happen to think. And so it's imperative that I help my clients who are not emotive to understand that they're human beings just like everyone else, and that it's imperative that they align whatever body language they are sending off with what's coming out of their mouth. And that is an absolute key, because people, they sense the disconnect. Does that make sense? They sense the different messages that they're getting from the body as opposed to the mouth. And that could throw people off. So when those two are aligned is what's absolutely important.
How about the divide, and there is one, male, female in the business context, particularly striving from mid to upper,
Yes.
not the top, but mid to upper.
Right.
There's games going on.
Right. You may have heard about some research that's come out in the past few years around women who are pursuing a career and want to move to the highest levels of an organization. And what the research essentially says is two things. One is that a woman, as she rises up in power and authority in any organization, her likability goes down. And people, especially men, tend to assign certain words to them that we're not going to repeat on air here. And that in a man, those words, those adjectives would not be applied if it was a male engaging in that behavior. So this is not me being politically correct. This is just what goes on in our culture and society. So that's one thing we've found, is that women's likability goes down as they rise up in organizations. The second thing that we found, which was very surprising, we're in partnership with an organization called the Respect Project Latin America, which did a pretty significant study in Ecuador and looked at organizations. And what they found is that, and we were surprised, to be honest with you, women, although most people are sensitive to respect and disrespect, women are more so. And we just published an article about this. Women seem to have a higher level of emotional intelligence on a whole than men. Women are also aware of the historical discrepancies, for example, between salaries of people in equal positions. And women are also historically aware of how there are so few of them at the leadership of so many organizations. I mean, look at the Fortune 500s. What do we have? Like 16 or 20 women at the CEO level of Fortune 500, something like that. It's a ridiculously small percentage. And so women are very, very aware of that. And so that's probably why they are more sensitive to respect and disrespect than men are. And there's probably a couple of other reasons we're not quite sure, but it's a significant finding that our leadership, our leaders, your clients, our clients need to know about, that there is a difference and we must pay attention.
So, Stephen, what do you think about Mary Barra from General Motors, who's just been, of course, she's been CEO and going electric, but now she's been named to head the conference board or something like that.
I think it's
this is like board. First time a woman's at that level.
Yeah. Well, it echoes what Greg's talking about. I mean, women are very aware of that disconnect. I'm not that familiar with the conference board or I can't remember if it was the conference board or the Better Business Bureau, but whatever it was, some
I'm
association
getting confused about it.
Yeah. But you know, the number of women even on those boards, much less leading those boards, has been dismal, to echo what Gregg is saying, without a doubt. And you know, but it's changed. Fortune is changing. I mean, I think Forbes or Fortune recently came out with a list of the top CEOs, and the lady who heads CVS Health got accolades for it. And I read a little bit about her story, and she's done a wonderful job at CVS Health and putting them as a primary center of information, as well as locations for people, COVID information and COVID vaccines, and you know, just really bringing that to the public. So you know, there are a lot of great women leaders out there.
There are. There was a really explosive article in Harvard Business Review just last year that talked about women appear to be by Zenger Folkman. It appears that women are better handling big business crisis than men. And the firms that are headed up by women during COVID and all the stuff that went on, apparently they were better at leading their organizations through that crisis than comparable men. And that was kind of explosive. And yet when you think about it, it kind of makes sense.
It does. And what I would love to know, I did some research for one of my most recent books, and the research showed that, again, this is stereotypical information, but it's based on scientific research, that under stress, men have a higher tolerance for risk and
Yes.
willingness for risk, and under stress, women have a lower tendency and willingness for risk. Now, I guess if manage your way through a crisis, you maybe having that lower tendency for risk makes you assess the situation, maybe slows down your decision-making processes. But I'd love to see a correlation between that research and the one you're talking about.
I love that. I love that. What a interesting. Okay, let's do it. Okay, let's just.
You and I can do research together.
Let's do
Absolutely.
it.
We'll write a book together as well.
Let's do it. I'm with you.
I've got a burning question. Sorry, Ed. I just got to get this off my feeling here, because one, I read an article by Gregg recently in Forbes, but the disrespect, particularly in North America, but even around the world, even in Australia recently. I mean, we saw protests in Australia and the police firing rubber bullets at construction workers, and that just doesn't happen in Australia. Like I said, I lived there for a long time. Why is disrespect seem to become so acceptable or tolerated even? Maybe not acceptable, maybe that's saying too strong, but is it acceptable or is it being tolerated in today's society?
That's a profound and very, very important question, which we keep looking at again and again and again. The research that, first of all, the research that we're doing indicates that public disrespect, meaning out in public, stores, retail, out on the street, is at an all-time high since, excuse me, my apologies, is similar to that which we saw during the height of the Vietnam War in the United States. Globally, we are seeing an increase in disrespect across the board, also in the street, but also in workplaces and in organizations. What Christine Porath, who I have so much respect for, she's a researcher at Georgetown University. She's been looking at this for years. She argues that stress is a #1 contributor to the amount of disrespectful behavior, but she says that's not it. We can't just say it's all about stress. I think we can all agree there's a lot of stress in the world right now. We definitely can all agree. And part of that is of our own making. You and I are constantly on our where's my phone? I think I hid it away deliberately. We're constantly on our phones, looking at the news. We're being bombarded all the time with stressors. And so that's automatically going to raise our cortisol levels and all that kind of stuff. And the second thing that's going on is the pace of business is faster than it's ever been. We're being asked to respond so quickly to so many things and so many crises and so many changes in such a rapid state that we're all kind of under constant stress. So, and when human beings are under stress, we lose it. We go to that bad place and we behave badly. The other thing I think you may be hinting at is around politics and the comity and the lack thereof and willingness to collaborate. We seem to the media shift that's gone on, where the media has now put itself in camps, political camps, has now, because that makes money for them. That's quite obvious. That's why they thrive. It has now kind of soaked into everything. Into everything that's going on in our lives has become, in a way, media politicized. So if you're on one side, you're feeling like you've got an enemy now, and the enemy is clearer. And so disrespect for the other sides of the political spectrum is higher now than it's ever been, certainly in the United States and arguably all over the world. So all of these things have come together, and I think it's a toxic brew. I think you would agree with me. And here are so many, my clients are mostly HR people. Here are my HR clients are going, hey, my CEO tells me I have to fix this. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. This is so much bigger than just HR, go fix it kind of thing,
So let me bring up a point here and make a couple of comments. And you guys are the pros, and I'm just playing moderator here. But I read that you're a Little League umpire.
I am, yes.
Yeah, and so do the kids respect your decisions?
I have, thank you for asking. I think it's a great question. I have found that the children out on the field and the kids playing the game generally behave like responsible, respectful little adults to me as an umpire. It's the parents in the stands who behave like disrespectful little children. You wouldn't believe the things I have heard said about my eyesight and how I need new glasses and how someone has obviously paid me off by the other team. I mean, just the horrific things they say about me. I just have to let it go past me. So the kids are great. The kids are fine.
That has been going on for years, Greg, because
Yes.
I umpired Little League baseball games when I was 17 through 20 and put myself through college umpiring Little League baseball.
Good for
games.
you, man.
And I only had one incident where I threw a kid out of a game, but I've thrown a few parents out of the
Me
stands.
too. Me too. I got to tell you this story. I shut down a game because, well, we have the Padres. I'm based in San Diego where it is. And we have the Padres here. And we had the grandson of a former Padre player out on my field one day. And the grandfather thought I was doing a really bad job at umpiring. His kid was pitching, and he started climbing the fence behind the backstop and screaming at me. And I'm like, Coach, control your fan, Coach. And I called a timeout, and they pulled him back down, and he just kept chirping. And finally, I called the two coaches out and said, guys, we're done. This is a little league game. Are you kidding me? So, and the coaches said, we understand. And boy, they were angry at that grandfather. So
that is really something.
Yep.
So, I've been watching baseball all my life, but in particular, I was watching the Padres until it got really painful.
Oh, man. Oh, man.
But the umpires, there's a move afoot to bring in computers rather than trust judgment. But so how do you think baseball is going to get respect back in that regard?
Boy, that's a tough one. I honestly don't know. I think baseball always had a veneer of respect, and as soon as you scratch it, and that goes for the players too, the players behave horrifically, I think, under the scenes. But I remember watching them Padres recently playing a team, and a call when the called third strike, and you could see the batter just say something, and you couldn't hear it, of course, but you could see what they said to the umpire, and then the umpire went, "You're out of here." And it was incredibly foul and incredibly disrespectful. And I think that's pretty much the normal, but we just don't hear it.
Interesting. So here we are, people working from home or working from somewhere, and some of them are anti-vaxxers, whatever. But more so, they just got used to being away from under the thumb or their watchful eye.
Yeah.
And, whether or not they think the reverse side of this green light up here on the computer, they're watching me. I don't know about that one, but there's a lot of this stuff out there that feeds into the disrespect.
I think so. I'm sure you saw it, but there was a study that came out a couple of years ago that said, in general, when employees are given the option to work from home, and it can work for the employer, that the employees actually are more productive and put in more time, are more productive, because they basically feel like they can manage their lives, their kids, all that stuff.
They want to be there. They want to be, and they have some quiet time, even if the TV's on or the kids are, playing right there. But what I read this morning also, I get up early and I read all this stuff. But I read that people are getting out of the house, even they don't want to go back to the office, but they go to a local WeWork thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
just to be in a different environment.
Just to
where
have some kind of
work.
connection. I think that's what so many of us miss. Now, there's arguably always a percentage of the population that just would love to sit in a little place by themselves with their computer and do their work and never interact with people. But that's a relatively small segment of the population. So what's happened now is so many of us, like me, I don't know about you, Ed and Stephen. I mean, I spend most of my week here in my great little office doing Zoom trainings or coaching on Zoom. And so just to get, the only thing I get out to see people is when I go to play tennis. So I play tennis 4 to 5 times a week, just so I can get out and be with people. So I think that makes a lot of sense, that everybody just wants to go to a place where there are other people, interact with other people, and still get their work done, but not go to the office.
Right. I used to do live meetings all over the place.
Yeah.
And it's been cold turkey for a while, and now I don't want to go to these meetings coming up in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month from now. There'll be hundreds, if not a couple of thousand, and there'll probably be good business relationships, the meet and greet, see and be seen. But man, never mind spend a few $1,000s, which is difficult, but is there a need anymore to do that? Yeah, there's some need, but it's not as automatic as it was a couple of years ago.
I agree. I went to, I was scheduled to do a keynote in Texas before COVID hit, and they put it off. And then I just went last month, and it was packed, and there were about 1,000 people in the room. And I really enjoyed being up in front of them, because I hadn't been in front of people like that for about a year and a half.
Yeah, it's motivating.
It was very motivating. People said, "Wow, Greg, you were bouncing off the walls up there." But I kid you not, I had one man, as I'm walking off the stage, this man came running at me with his arms outstretched, and he just grabbed me, gave me this huge bear hug, and he goes, "It's so good to hear an in-person speaker who is so good again." He says, "I'm delighted. You're the best." And I'm like, "Okay, thank you. I know I'm good," but he was just so excited to have a personal connection again. So, and I was too. But I haven't met with my staff in person. The last time I met with my staff in person was about 4 months ago. So, I have a team of 8 people working with me, and all we do is meet virtually. So, and it works. We're okay. Yeah, I bet you the same for you too.
And better. Now have relationships with people in India and Dubai I would never have.
Yeah. Isn't that fascinating?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Someday we'll get together and it'll be great.
You two live down the block from each other.
I know.
I'm in downtown on State Street.
Right. So Stephen, you travel a lot from Mexico City, do you?
Yeah, I do. I've been traveling back and forth between Southern California and Mexico City for about 2 years now, pretty back and forth. And
Got it.
But I travel from here. And interestingly, just one of the weird things, because I lived in Palm Springs, I still have a place.
Yeah.
It would take me 5 hours to get from Palm Springs to Houston, for instance. Now I can get to Houston in 3 hours, and Mexico City's actually closer. But I do notice that, particularly this, there's a lot more respect. I mean, it's interesting, different cultures around the world and different organizations. But even here in Mexico, even though there's a lot of disrespect for the government, I would say the political environment in Mexico is about as polarized as it is the United States. Maybe not as vocally polarized, but it is definitely polarized. But here, the respect for business leaders still remains high. And that's partly a cultural thing. Right. But I also think there's, again, going back what you said, I think some of the Mexican business leaders probably have higher emotional intelligence, just being Latino, than in their cultural, because it's a societal culture or family-related culture. So I think there's a lot more emotional intelligence levels within the leadership of Latin companies than maybe in some the majority of most North American companies.
That's interesting. And yet also from what I understand from my advisory council members who are Latino, that they were raised with, you must respect the business leader, regardless of how badly that business leader behaves. So that's interesting. So you're saying there's kind of a discontinuity there on the one hand.
There is, and I think that's more the older generation, but that's much like Asia, but it's in the word you used, veneer, earlier was great, because even in Asia, when I lived there in the 80s and 90s, to about 2010, I guess. If you don't respect your leader, you don't voice it.
Right.
But you stop interacting, innovation stops. You stop throwing out ideas. You start working your job 9 to 5 because that's your job until you leave your company.
Yeah.
I think in Latin America, particularly the older generation leaders, it's the same thing. If that leader loses respect, you still have to respect them from a societal standpoint, but you stop cooperating, you stop innovating, you stop contributing more than what you have to. You do your job and that's it.
And Greg, I got to jump in. Told you read the sports page today about Jace Tingler.
Yep, I did.
Okay, yep. And then Seidler, the chairman, was talking about he noticed a breakdown in communications and last June, but stayed out of it. Okay, because he, Preller, the general manager, is in charge, and Tingler was Preller's guy,
right?
So blah blah. Okay, but all of the commentator today is that they collapsed. The past month, right? Up till then they were okay, and that has to do with respect internally and a breakdown in, they're entertainers and they're not trained to be actors.
Nope.
And they've got a tough job, even though they're. And if they don't believe what the coaches say or how Tingler is managing the coaches or getting people not to stop swinging, all these guys, they stopped swinging at pitches that were an inch off the plate.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden they didn't score or run or do anything. That was a direct rebuke to leadership.
Yeah. Yeah. And they were on track. If you looked at them in May and June, they were on track to be the best team in baseball.
Right. Or at least equal to the Giants, at least.
At least. And everybody was saying, finally, finally we have a Padres team that really can compete, can really stand up there with the big boys. And then it all went to heck in a handbasket so quickly.
Almost like that, right? Right after All-Star break.
Yep. Amazing.
It's like, what happened here? Bang, something happened.
By the way, you brought up the respect in Latin cultures for the leadership. One of the things our research also uncovered, which again surprised us to a certain degree, but maybe we shouldn't be surprised, is the folks at the lowest level, believe it or not, expect to be treated with disrespect. At the lowest level of the organization, they expect to be pooped on by the leadership. Isn't that interesting?
It's also true in India, particularly in manufacturing. And I think both India and Mexico are getting away from that a little bit. I don't know about the rest of Latin America, but Mexico and India, particularly as both these economies become knowledge-based economies rather than manufacturing-based economies. So, but yeah, there's a lot at the lower level of disrespect and people being treated poorly.
Yep.
Hi, this is Ed, and I thank you for tuning in to Global TV Talk Show, a unit on globalbusinessnews.net. We broadcast to the world, as you know by now. So I wanted to make sure that you understand that our programs are advertising supported. We're grateful for co-sponsors, advertisers. They have a marketing budget coupled with a strong desire to be associated with our top quality program. And of course, I'm grateful. Thank you. So for the next few minutes, you're going to see some commercials. It's mostly very low key. And Our prices are very, very reasonable. Our exposure for the advertisers go 12 months and beyond. Some of our advertisers have been with us since March, April of 2020. And Google Analytics has tracked over 125,000 what they call audience page views, which means you looking at this page, that's a page view. Now, if you happen to go to one of our other shows or to our radio broadcasts or to our newspaper or magazine, those become additional page views as measured by Google Analytics. And so when they say 125,000 since spring of 2020 up through Labor Day, a month ago, that's pretty good numbers. And the past 30 days, Google Analytics has measured just under 6,000 audience page views. And that, according to them, is a 42% increase in audience participation over the month of August. So thank you very much. Well, here's our advertisers, and we'll be back in just a couple of minutes or so, and we'll proceed with this interesting conversation. Thank you.
This episode from the meeting room of Global TV Talk Show is brought to you by
The Bridge School, the accredited international online private school of choice, at bridgek12.org.
Porch Light Rental and Destination Services. Reduce your renter lump sum or managed relocation costs. Visit them at porchlightrental.com.
And by airs.com. With our full range of services, we can help design and manage your international relocation. Find us at airs.com.
Primestone Partners, featuring corporate, government, and developer housing solutions, as well as senior-level advisory services. Find them at primestonepartners.com.
And by International Auto Source. We are the vehicle experts for expats, featuring all major brands of automobiles with flexible solutions and financing. On the web at intlauto.com.
Become a global player in your field.
Cross Culture to Go provides virtual support for your global business and career success.
We can help you thrive in 140 plus countries and markets.
On the web at crossculturetogo.com.
Something that's really neat is that the Bridge School partners with various organizations to provide learning for their students. For example, we partner with a major ballet company, and we are able to enroll several of their students into our school. So now not only is the student able to participate in a school and have a seamless transition while they're very active in their ballet career, but now they have other dancers that are with them that are doing some of the same courses. So it's almost becoming a camaraderie where they're taking similar courses, they're working together on their ballet, and really being able to form this great partnership with these organizations to provide a needed service. A lot of times there are student athletes who will spend hours and hours at the gym or at the basketball courts, wherever it is. And if they're attending a traditional school, they're in school from 8 to 3. They get a quick snack, and then they're at the gym for 3 to 4 hours in the evening. Coming to us and having that partnership, they're able to break that up throughout the day. They can have a morning practice, get some schooling in, have an afternoon practice, finish their schooling in the evening. So there's that flexibility. And additionally, if there are tournaments or performances, it's fantastic because if there's a week where they have shows straight through, they can take that week off of learning and then pick back up when they're done. So it offers this this great flexibility. And for the program owners of these sports leagues, it is a win-win situation for them because they see this need. They see this need that their students need to make sure that they are obtaining the grades necessary to be successful adults in our country and in other countries. But it provides them an environment where they can be successful at both.
Hi, I'm Sergey Gorbatov.
I'm Angela Lane.
Together we are researchers, writers and practitioners in the field of human resources.
And we've also been multi-country, multi-assignment career expats.
We owe our professional development and growth to a very large extent to the international assignment opportunities that we have had.
But in a world where distributed work may become the norm, we also want to understand what will happen to the nature, duration, and purpose of international assignments.
Together with our colleague, Julian Dalzell from the University of South Carolina, we're undertaking a study on the future of expatriation.
And we'd value your contribution. You can participate in this important study by completing a simple 10-minute questionnaire.
Access the questionnaire by typing in your browser tinyurl.com/expert study. That's tinyurl.com/expert study. You can also find the link here on Ed's website next to this video.
Thank you for joining us in this study. In return for your contribution, we'll provide you with a copy of our research.
And of course, you'll be invited to an exclusive webinar hosted by Ed, where we will share our findings right here on Global Business News.
And so please go to tinyurl.com/expat study. Take the survey so that we can better understand the future of expatriation.
And they kind of just shrug their shoulders to go, oh, that's normal. And
it has been.
Yeah.
So how much of this is financial class, and the idea that the business leaders are, it's all family-owned companies, even though some may be public, it's family-owned. And the generational thing goes generation to generation, and so they're upper class. And the lower level, economically speaking, they're in their place and they don't rebel.
That's a damn good question. I think though, the generational question that comes into this is really interesting because our millennials all across the world, millennials now, and the Gen Zers are the most educated generations in the workforce in history.
Right. And
I've got
computer.
Totally.
Right. Yeah.
And they're totally connected and they know what's going on in the world. I've got 3 millennial kids. They're high achievers. They don't fit the stereotype of being slackers or any of that kind of stuff. These kids will not brook disrespect for 1 millisecond. Now, when the 3 of us were coming up through the ranks, I don't know about you, when I first joined the workforce, I joined a union. I was treated like crap. I was told, this is what newbies get. You get the scut work. You have to pay your dues. And it was incredibly disrespected. I was hazed. I was harassed. You name it, they gave it to me. And I was told, get over it. That's just the way it is. Well, my millennial kids wouldn't put up with that for 1 second. I put up with it for 4 years. 1 second they wouldn't deal with that. And they just say, I'm out of here. I'll find an organization where I am respected. And I think that's a fundamental shift that we are seeing, that I find I have to get across to the baby boomers in this world who say the world has changed and you cannot treat your lowest level employees like crap and expect them to just put up with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think part of that is that millennials and Generation X and Z are empowering themselves.
Yeah.
I talked with a gentleman here in Mexico City about 3 weeks ago, and his company has hired 200 IT people in the last 6 months.
Wow.
But here's the killer. He says, is it easy to find? He says, it's hard to find because the first question they ask, can I work from home? And if you can't at least partly work from home, and these are people doing coding, writing apps, doing websites, all that technical IT stuff, then they said, well, I won't come in for the interview, or I won't even show up on Zoom for the interview. So they're empowering themselves because they say, well, that's my requirement. If I can't work at home at least part of the time, I'm not interested in the job because there are other opportunities out there.
So is that going on now with truck drivers and people who work in restaurants?
Not in Mexico City. The truck driver thing in Europe, particularly in England, was because so many of them were foreign nationals. And when the pandemic hit, they went back to their families because they were afraid that they get stuck in England during the lockdowns and everything. And now,
Brexit didn't help, because that was basically premised on, okay, too many foreigners are taking our jobs, so we're going to make it very difficult for foreigners to live here in the UK. Well, now they've got a truck driver shortage, and you know, what a surprise.
And a gasoline shortage because of that.
Yeah. Gotta love it. Gotta love it. So I think what we're trying to do is help people understand that respect is a fundamental interactive core of how we should be. That's not to say we're perfect at it. We're all flawed human beings. But if we come at our relationships from a fundamental premise that you are worthy, Ed, Stephen, you are both worthy of respect for various reasons, for your experience, your knowledge, but also because you're another human being, and that we're working together. So I'm gonna give you respect. I'm not going to wait for you to respect me. As a leader, I urge my clients to, if you're a leader, give the respect first. Be the first to respect, because 9 times out of 10, that will actually benefit the relationship. It'll come back at you. But to sit back and assume, oh, well, since I'm the CEO, you should respect me first. It doesn't work. It doesn't work, because people will resent even the implication that the CEO must be respected before the CEO will respect you. People just bristle at that. So we say, go ahead, give it away. What does it hurt you to be respectful? It doesn't hurt you at all, and it's actually going to benefit you.
Interesting, isn't it? Wow.
Yeah.
Stephen?
Absolutely interesting, and absolutely, I totally agree with Greg. It's absolutely mandatory in today's world to do that. So Greg, give us a couple of tips though. Let's say you are in a workplace and you get disrespected. How do you handle that without reacting and disrespecting back? How do you stop it from being a confrontation? So what are your tips on that?
My first tip is take a bath. And take a bath. And the B stands for breathe.
Okay.
Breathe. And the A stands for acknowledge your own feelings, because as you know, psychologically, if we start giving our feelings names, we're more likely to think about them in a cognitive way rather than be reactive from our primitive brains. So the first thing you want to do is just breathe. When someone disrespects you, just take a breath and try not to react, because that's probably not going to be good. And then acknowledge your own feelings. And then the T is essentially all about take some time to think through of how you could react in a way that would have a good outcome, rather than be reactive and just disrespect back or shut down or run away, fight, flight, freeze. And then finally, the H stands for hold off. Hold off on doing anything, and think about it. Well, I often tell people the old advice: sleep on it. Sleep on it. Tomorrow morning, you'll probably have a different perspective on it. You'll have more clarity of how to handle it. But the last thing you want to do when somebody disrespects you, especially if it's in front of other people, is to immediately react and go into fight, flight, freeze mode, because I guarantee you it's probably going to get ugly. It's going to make it worse. So take a bath. Breathe, acknowledge your emotions, take time, and hold off.
Excellent. And I would guess part of that also would be, because the other human tendency would be, even if you did all that, you'd leave the meeting room. If you were disrespecting public, you'd leave the meeting room and you start bad mouthing the person.
Absolutely.
So that's got to be other aspect to just keep it.
You're going to go to your buddies. You're going to go to your buddies and you say, you won't believe what they just did. Can you believe this? And the buddies are going to go, hey, to their buddies, hey, did you hear what so-and-so did this? It's just a mess. You're absolutely right.
I tell a similar story about become a first responder, not a first reactor. And it's the same thing. Pause, ask questions. I learned this in scuba diving. I got certified up to rescue diver. And the first thing they teach us in rescue diving is when somebody yells, help, 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 you just don't jump in the water. There could be fishing nets, could be an oil spill, there could be a current going the other way, jellyfish. Everyone thinks of sharks, of course. So you have to assess the situation. You got to pause and ask some questions, pause, breathe as well, and then assess the situation. Then you respond rather than reacting. So very similar philosophies.
Well, and that we read during some of the riots, the street riots, race riots a year or so ago. Like the police didn't rush right in. They held back. And they wanted to see, is this a trap? Or is somebody else going to hit me from the other side if I come running in?
I'm sorry to say that wasn't the case here in La Mesa where I lived.
That first time, right? That was the opening. It was huge. The opening shot around the world, if you will. Right.
The rally itself, the Black Lives Matter rally itself here in La Mesa was fine. It was fine. Sure, it wasn't impassioned. Yes, were people chanting and upset? Absolutely.
But who would even think about Grossmont Center being a center for Black Lives Matter?
Well, what happened is there were some outside groups that, let's believe it or not, they hired vans. And they bust in people who deliberately were sent here to do one thing: loot our community, to break into windows, and they had nothing to do with the protests, but they took advantage of them. And then the police they saw what was happening from the looting part, and the police did, okay, we're going to do an overwhelming show of force. That created a huge explosion, and we had buildings burned down. My bank was burned down. There historic buildings in La Mesa. It was an absolute mess. So there was a lot of contributors to that. There was no respect anywhere to be found. Although the leaders of the protest kept saying, as much as we're upset with the police, we must respect that they play a role in our society, and we have to figure out a way to work with them. I'll never forget, there was a Black minister who stood up and said, look, that police officer over there with his riot helmet on, he's my brother. I have to figure out a way to work with my brother, even though I'm afraid he might hurt me. And that was very powerful to hear. And yet it all dissolved into a nightmare of aggression and upset. And that's what we try to say to everybody is, look, respect is such a core primitive feeling. And if you don't, as Stephen said, take the time to step back and think it through, you could blow something up. You could blow up a personal career just because you felt disrespected. You could blow it up in a heartbeat. And is it really worth it? And how do we become adults where we can manage our emotions better? And that's not easy. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's an imperative in my opinion.
Well, we could talk forever on this. Stephen, why don't you do some kind of a summary here that we can focus on for the next 5 minutes?
Well, as I'd summarize, as Gregg says, we're all human beings, and we should respect each other. Even if we disagree with one another, we should be able to respect it. And then each of us needs to control our emotions. As he said, whether use my phrase, first responder, use his phrase to pause, to take a bath, to breathe, acknowledge, take time off, hold off your response or your reaction. Great acronym. I think that it's really just, and coming out of the pandemic, hopefully one of the silver linings has been that we have got to learn that we have to treat each other with a little bit more humaneness, I guess is the right word. Humaneness, a little bit more kindness, a little bit more emotional intelligence. And but these, I love to quote my favorite philosopher, and all of us baby boomers will remember him, Yoda, who said we must unlearn what we have learned. And I think what a lot of Gregg is talking about is we've learned as leaders to be directive, to be controlling, to tell people, to have that managerial hat on and to expect respect because we have a title.
Yep.
And we have a title, we feel that we have entitlement. And I think now we have to unlearn that as leaders, particularly those of us who are baby boomers and older, is unlearn those behaviors, and now learn a more human leadership way of approaching things. He calls it respectful leadership. Doesn't matter what you call it, it's the behavior is the important thing here. That's how I would summarize.
Hey, Gregg, I want you to come back on Global TV sometime, and
Thank you.
and let's do chapter 2 here.
I love talking to you guys. I can talk with you all day long. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure.
Peace.
Peace out.
What we want is engaging conversations, and that's what we had. So here we go.
And maybe the force be with you.
Yes. Thank you both for having me on. It's been an honor and a privilege. Thank you.
It's been a lot
Gregg.
of fun, and thank you for the education.
Thank you for
Ed
what
in
you're
San
doing.
Diego, and Gregg in nearby La Mesa, and Stephen in high above us all in Mexico City. Ciao.
Ciao.
Thank you for joining us in the meeting room at Global TV Talk Show.
Have a wonderful day, and stay safe.